MSP, if they're checking their own work, it is the student marking their own homework.
Luke Irwin spent 15 years in IT operations, from managing warship databases for the Australian Navy to running 6,500 servers for the Queensland Government. Now he's on a mission to protect small businesses from cyber threats. Independently, no commissions, no sales pitch, just the truth.
Product of best fit for the client's need, or is it simply the product of best commission? A lot of these attacks, they're a spray and pray, seeing if it hits something and see if it sticks. These cybercrime gangs, they are fully corporatized. Attacking your business, they are then creating emotional pain and stress that's going to encourage you to pay money. Your business is how you pay your own salary. It's how you pay your staff, all about managing risk. And that, what policy does, it sets the baseline. Cybersecurity is not and should not and never should be the Department of No. If you receive something that's encouraging you to act right away, act with urgency, act with impatience, act without consideration, pause, breathe, reread, then act. All you need is that 3-second breath to turn off your amygdala. A small business, they are still a passive target. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. Acknowledgement that cyber risk is something that you need to address, and putting it off till tomorrow is not a suitable answer.
Luke, we live in an industry that runs on fear.
100%.
And businesses who sell IT are very addicted to sales commissions. But you built your firm, Aegis, to be totally independent. You refuse to take a cent from vendors.
Correct.
So what is fundamentally wrong, and what are you doing right in the industry?
So one of the reasons when I spun up my firm of how I decided I wanted to run it was I didn't want to be beholden to hardware or software partners. Now, that's not saying they're all bad. It's not saying they have bad products. But I didn't want to come across a situation where my ethics, my advice, my recommendations on how to address a particular problem was ever called into question on the basis of you just sell that product. And I look at that across a number of tech partners and service providers where they make recommendations to the client that isn't accounting for the risk or the context of that specific organization. So then I have to ask the question based upon that is that the product of best fit for the client's need, or is it simply the product of best commission? The way which I've approached my engagement with my clients, my partners and things like that, is that if I have a client that I have picked up and I've worked with and I've run the assessments and I've worked out what needs to happen, I will provide the recommendations to them going, hey, you need an EDR software, endpoint detection remediation. And these are the brands that I know that in your space do a very good job. Do you want to try and resolve this yourself? Or two, would you like me to make an introduction to 2, 3, 4 tech partners who can provide you that solution? That way it's creating that independence of advice. It's putting it into a position where what I am doing is not necessarily benefiting from the tail of work. And I look back to when I was still in-house and bringing in consultants to run assessments for me and support me on work, and they'd come in and they go, oh yeah, your network's terrible, it needs to be replaced. And my response would be, I only replaced it 18 months ago. What exactly is wrong with it? Oh, but we sell this and it's so much better. It's like, do I actually need that? Or are you just trying to make more margin? And I never wanted to have that ethical problem to deal with. I wanted to position so when I spoke to a client, my information was treated as fact-based, not pre-sales meeting or pre-sales pitch or whatever other term you want to use to try and generate a stronger lead and a stronger commission. It's like, I want to give my advice, support the organization. If they want help to implement and manage, I'm happy to hang around and provide consulting ongoing, but I'm not the one selling them the hardware, the software, the managed services. The only place where I will do implementation is if someone says, hey, we want to do ISO 27001 or SOC 2 on this CFS. Great, I can implement that for you. But when out of those findings, if I go, hey, you actually need better firewalls, you need EDRs, you need better backup architecture, let me introduce you to some people who can do that. The advantage of that model is also it means that I'm not a competitor to MSPs, MSSPs, solutions integrators, break-fix operators. I'm not stepping on their toes. I'm not a risk or a threat to them. I'm providing the independent consulting advice. And I can turn around and go, look, this is what your client needs. This is how you need to position it to them to identify the risk and address the risk through their services. Hope that's answered the question, not gone too far off track.
No, that's perfect. It paints the perfect picture that we'll get into about the framework environment and how that fits your own ethic and you as a person, which is amazing and very not easily something that you come across in our current environment. You have a saying, I think, that hits really hard. You say asking your MSP or your IT provider, okay, that to audit their own security, it's like asking a student to mark their own homework.
Yeah, it's the fox guarding the hen house.
But why can we never trust the people who build our systems to be the ones to check if it's safe?
So there's answers there. Now, this is not to say that, like, I work with a lot of MSPs and a lot of very good MSPs and tech partners out there. There's many I will go hand on heart and vouch for. What I need to call out is that if you've designed and built a system, you don't have an objective set of eyes to verify what the gaps are, what the weaknesses are, what has deficiencies. If humans were great at assessing and evaluating their own work, we wouldn't have security flaws and security bugs in products. Everything would be perfect. All it takes is one person with a little bit of oversight who's looked at a firewall rule going, oh, that's always been there. We need that for this. That's always been there. It's always been there. It's always been that way, is one step away from something going pear-shaped. Because why does it need to be there now? Have we evaluated why you've got that rule that allows this traffic from there to there, regardless of any other filtering constraints? Double checking and verifying and validating, make sure that you have the correct posture, the right structure, the right architecture in place. So you want to be double checking that work. If you've got the MSP checking their own work, and this is something which I consistently rail against time and time again online, and I get told by some parties that I'm right and others that I'm wrong and others that I'm just trying to chase my own hip pocket, is that the MSP, if they're checking their own work, it is the student marking their own homework. If you've got the fractional CISO who is also, or virtual CISO who is placed with that MSP, you're paying somebody to agree with their own company's findings. How exactly did that work out for the tobacco industry? So you're paying a senior security expert to verify the behaviors of their own organization. Is that done in line with what is in the best interest of the client or the best interest of the MSP? This is not to say that all of them are unethical or making poor choices. It is simply to say that, is there a separation of the church and state in that case? Is the product and the recommendation and the approach being provided to the client in line with their best interests, as you should be doing ethically as a consultant? Does the fractional CISO or virtual CISO provided by the MSP that you're paying a service for, do they have the power to override the general manager of operations for the business on how something's going to be done for a client? If it's going to have no cost, certainly. But what if it's going to have a material impact on cost, performance, and profitability of the organization because what they're doing doesn't align with the client's needs? Do they have the authority to make that change and enforce that change without being penalized or fired? If there is no separation, then I have to call into question those relationships. There are several clients I work across where I sit between the client and the MSP at the security layer, and I will issue instructions to the MSP on how to do things. And the MSP bills for that accordingly. And the client's good with that because they know that an independent third party who is specifically engaged to look after their interests is doing that. This is not to say that MSPs aren't looking out for their clients' interests, but will they put their clients' interests above their own? Some will, many won't.
I agree. I see it every day. I work in the industry.
Yeah.
And we will get into this topic definitely. But I guess stepping back for a minute about you, you spent 15 years in IT operations. So you were that guy, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kept the lights on, right? You were then at a certain point, you decided to switch to the, as I call it, the dark side in cyber.
Yeah, you're not.
What?
So no, this is year number almost 25 in the tech industry for me, and I try to call it the tech industry rather than the IT industry because IT is not cyber, cyber is not IT. They are cousins. They are not twins. I started off doing IT in the military in my last 2 years in the Navy. I was looking after the Australian Navy's warship maintenance database platform called FEMA MIS, where I was looking after a set of Unix mainframes running AIX Unix and Infomix databases. And I had 4 of them around the country, and they could tell you what every warship could and couldn't do. That was being thrown deep into the pool with a 50-kilo weight. Here's Unix. Learn it. Then after I got out, I worked for a company that's now called Coates Hire. It used to be National Hire, and I helped run their desktop team there. Worked at Westfield for a few years running desktop there. Worked for a multinational insurance firm where I did server/desktop. Came back to Queensland at the middle of the GFC. Worked for an organization called QComp, which is now part of, it's the work cover regulator, now part of industrial relations, where I was desktop server. Then crossed into pure server at Education Queensland, where I went from being a contractor to the senior manager in 5 years, where I was running 6,500 servers, 1,600 domain controllers in 14 forested domains, 1,400 locations, and about 500,000 people on the network. A quiet week for my team. So when I was running just the server team, before I was running the identity team as well, I had 14 or 15 sysadmins, 2 team leads in the team reporting into me. A quiet week was between 1,100 and 1,300 level 3 support requests a week. That was a quiet week or a normal week. So been there, done that, don't miss it. But that's also there's things I miss about that environment because I learned a lot. But it's also where I started to learn that GRC, specifically policy and process, can have a massive impact on organizational structure and architecture and preventing bad things or risky things making it through to the network. The security team at Education Queensland was massively under-resourced at the time. It's much better resourced now. At the time, there was 3 people. So my team was dealing with a lot of the design and the architecture that goes into those sort of things. After I left there and started working in small business, I started taking on roles that were far more cyber focused in their outcomes. And then eventually started super specializing in GRC. And then 3 years ago, I went, hey, time to do my own thing.
That's amazing. And yes, you have definitely got the right reputation out there. You are the go-to guy. I think a lot of businesses appreciate everything you do for sure.
Oh, I just want to see the harms reduced. Like I want to do, and I want to see the harms get reduced to small business and medium business because the big guys can afford it. Small guys can't.
Yeah. Let's get into that. So this will be a bit of a 2-parter. I also work in the majority SMB environment.
Yes.
I hear every day from these SMB businesses, Luke, whether they're a small cafe owner or they're a plumber or they're a civil business that's successfully slowly climbed their way up. But the one thing I hear is, Bora, look, mate, I'm a nobody. I don't have money. Why would the Russian hacker target me? And you have a scary analogy, I think, which is worth hearing, which is about a lion in a savannah that explains why that these SMBs are the perfect target. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, there's actually 2 really good analogies that kick in there. So one of the lines that I will use when I'm trying to explain the perception of risk is, if you and a friend are running away from a lion on a savannah, you do not have to be faster than the lion. You've got to be faster than your friend. Same thing applies for zombie apocalypse. Now, the other analogy there is that a lot of these attacks, they're a spray and pray or a throwing mud at the wall or shotgun into a crowd type effect. They are hitting a series of IP addresses and seeing what lands. That's it. They are not targeting you specifically. They are targeting your organizational size and lack of maturity, because they know that you're not going to have a lot of these things, a lot of the controls and the protections and methodologies and processes in place. So they're literally driving by in a car, throwing mud at the wall and seeing if it hits something and see if it sticks. If it sticks, that is when they will start compromising things. Based upon that, the best way which I've found to explain this is most small businesses in Australia are on a scale of 1 to 10 on a security posture, let's call it a 3, if they're lucky, 2 to a 3. So that means the bad guys, in order to beat you, need a 4. That's not high. Now, there is little point in taking a small business to a banking grade security, which might be a 9. It's pointless. It's how you bankrupt them. It's pointless. Serves no value. But if we can lift them to a 4 or a 5, that mud's going to slide right off. It doesn't become a problem. And that's where just putting the basics and the controls in place. So that way you go from being a soft target to being a harder target. The reason these guys attack is that while you think that your business has no value or has no money, you still want to run your business. Your business is how you pay your own salary, pay your mortgage, send your kids to school camp, go to dinner with the spouse. It's how you pay your staff, how you pay your vendors. So you're attached to that idea. By attacking your business, they are then creating emotional pain and stress that's going to encourage you to pay money to them to make that pain go away and be able to continue operating your business. That is what they do. They're not going after you, Bob the plumber, because you posted on Facebook. They don't care. But if you happen to be in a crowd of 1,000 people and they're throwing mud and a piece of mud lands on you, guess what? You've been hit. And that is what they do. It's not targeted. When we start crossing into the targeted cybercrime side of things, if you're getting mentions in the press, in trade journals, in contracts, in tenders, the bad guys look at those too. So if you've put in for a $20 million New South Wales government tender and you get announced as the winner and you're in the trade journals, you are going to get targeted because they know that you now have money. They want said money. So that is what they will do. As you get more mentions and noticed, then they will start targeting. Now, the reason they'll do that is that these cybercrime gangs, they are fully corporatized. They have HR teams, internal dispute resolution processes, bonus structures, KPIs and metrics and reporting. They are organized like a well-functioning, organized company with a single focus of extracting criminal proceeds from other organizations. Someone will be engaged to write a phishing email to the business. Someone respond. They'll then pass that information on to an initial access broker who will find a way to take that and compromise and make in. Then once they're in, they'll pass that on to someone else who knows how to move around the environment quietly and quickly. Then once they've done that, they'll then pass it on to the silent installers to basically install the hostile software. They have a well-functioned run team to highly monetize their attacks. Now, that comes at a cost. They're not going to use that cost on you as the small business unless they know you have money, like they said prior tender, or you're in the medium business space, call it 100 mil plus, or in big business, enterprise, government, whatever. But at the small business, all we have to do is try and get you a Teflon coated raincoat so that mud, when it hits you, it just slides right off. And the basic will do that.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a great analogy. I just had Ryan from CyberCert on, and it's putting the framework into place, meaning that you don't need to have, I'm not saying you need to use this particular technology. You need to, it's just, if we think about it, I use the house analogy. It's if my front door is just left open, then someone driving past is going to see that and think, that's an easy target. I'll just walk in and grab the keys. Versus if all I'm asking you to do, Mr. Business, is not just close your door, put a security door. So if your door's open, at least one, it can't be seen through, or two, there's something with an initial protection. No one's saying you have to put laser beams around the house. You have to put the 6-foot walls in.
You've hit the nail on the head. Like, I look at one of my old residences where I used to live about 3 or 4 years back. Our house had we grew a hedge in the front yard. We had security screens on the front door. We had 2 large dogs and 6-foot fences and heavy curtains so people couldn't see into the lounge room, dining room, kitchen. Our neighbor, sliding glass door that often was left slightly open. Curtains were always pulled back, and they had no screening between the road and their house. If a burglar is looking at our residences, which one are they going to go for? Not mine. Because when you've got a 50-kilo German Shepherd that is twitchy, not that he was angry, he was just like, oh my God, there's a human, give me pats. They don't know that, but the other target is a softer target. It is a lower risk target. We can get in, we can get out, we can get what we want. And the odds of us being hurt, caught, whatever, is massively reduced. They're doing risk assessments on their own. They want to monetize quickly. They don't want to play the long game unless they have to. But again, there are crime gangs who specialize in that, but they have a different cost base.
Yeah. And I guess the big thing here also is that you walk into businesses effectively after they've been destroyed. Doesn't matter what size it is, right? So you know about the high-tech spy stuff that's being used by these hackers, but I want the truth here. What is the single, I use the term dumbest on this podcast, or most obvious mistake smart people make that lets the bad guys in?
If you're going to do more than just the basics, like the Essential Eight, it's prescriptive, but it's designed for enterprise, military, government. It's big. SMB 10001, it's well designed for small business. Things like ISO 27001 and SOC 2 are risk and scope based. So you need a Luke to come in and go, what do we do? What do we need? How do we do it? What's the risk? What's the threats? How do we address it? That comes at a cost because it's not a small piece of work. And there are small businesses where ISO and SOC 2 are reasonable, but it needs to be in line with contracts and risk and what they're doing. But for most organizations, align to the SMB 1001, go for at least the gold level, please. And it's got some really good controls in there to actually substantially improve the security posture.
Yeah. And just want to touch on that. So if we want to explain this in the simplest way, you mentioned before policy and GRC, but let's talk framework,
Yes.
SMB 1001, which a lot of, as you said, is absolutely 100% achievable, whether you're literally a one-man band that's just started and got your own domain, or you've got a few hundred staff members for that matter. What
I would question that one a tiny bit. So they say that the standard is suitable for up to 1,000 people.
Okay.
I don't disagree, but I feel that once you start cracking 100 people, the conversation needs to shift to being one that is more risk-based. Now, I'm not saying don't do SMB 1001. I'm saying, but do that plus something else. It is a good foundation for a cyber risk framework or a cyber approach. One of the things with all cybersecurity is just because you've got your certification or got your standard or got your tick doesn't mean you're done. It means that you have a good basis upon which to work. Now, you can choose to go no further if you choose not to, and that's a choice. But you can always choose to do more. And it doesn't have to necessarily cost you a lot of money. It could be we run training, or we run tabletop exercises, or we put in phishing resistant MFA instead of just MFA. Or we change our patching cycle to instead of being monthly to being weekly. Every one of those has a material impact on cybersecurity risk. And it's just making it so the risk is smaller and smaller. You can never eliminate it, but doing what you can. But what was the other part of the question around GRC?
You mentioned the policy and GRC, but in the simplest terms, like you're speaking to a teenager.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier that it's something you do, but it's so important to a business. And I put it together like you got the framework and then you got your policy. Why is it so important now in today's age that regardless, again, why is it so important to even just have the simplest policies in place for a business?
So the policies are upon which, policies need to be signed off and endorsed by executive leadership, the board, the owner, the founder, whoever's in charge. That now demonstrates there's an executive level buy-in and acknowledgement of the risk associated with cybersecurity, what it presents to the business. That means you've now got boss level backing to go, no, you can't just roll out AI onto everyone's workstation. Or no, you can't go to 2-character passwords because you're too lazy to type 6. Please use at least 12-character passwords anyway. But it creates a baseline upon which you can start measuring and improving the security position and the security posture, because you have now defined what is unacceptable or what is the minimum acceptable standard. The policy is what you do. The auditing and the compliance is verifying that you do what you say you do. The policy is governance. It is saying that the boss, the owner, the founder, the board, whatever, has said that we agree that this is what we're doing. So if you don't do that, you could be terminated. You could receive a written warning. You could not get a bonus. It could be any number of things. Now, there are organizations that sign these policies and they pay lip service to them, and that is not fun to work with. They do it because they feel they need to, not because they actually believe in the risk. And you can only pick them pretty quickly when you're engaging with them. But to the teenager, these things are how the business defines how it wants to respond to cybersecurity. If we go that no password is going to be less than 12 characters, then the IT teams and the security teams will go and set up the password system so that nothing less than the 12-character password can be used. It sets the bounds of what is acceptable. And from there, we can make things better. We go, okay, cool, it's great, we've got that. Do we say we're going to use multi-factor? Okay, cool. Now, when someone wants to push back and go, oh, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this, and that's fine. The policy says this. Do you want to go and have a discussion with the boss as to why you think you don't need to follow the rules like everybody else? I'm sure people don't think they should be doing the speed limit. People still speed and they still get punished. But it's there because it is the rule of how things are going to be done. And then from there, you can build upon that. And I've stopped many a bad initiative by having effective policy in place. Now, I do need to call out that cybersecurity is not and should not and never should be the Department of No. It is the Department of No, but how about we do it this way instead? Providing alternatives, providing options to the organization of what can we do to manage and mitigate this risk in another way. So let's say the organization goes, we really need to use this product, but it doesn't have MFA. But our policy says we must have MFA. Okay, so what else can we do to manage and mitigate that risk of not having MFA? Because the risk of not having that is a simple password breach now exposes the information. Now, based upon human behavior, people would generally use the same password in more than one location. Okay, so to compensate for that risk, we will deploy password managers, which will create a randomized password for each and every separate account, and will increase the length required on this service to 22 characters. Now, you as the staff member don't have to remember that password. The password manager does that for you. It has a complex password and it has MFA on it. So we've essentially created an effective safety control around that, what's called a compensating or mitigating control to manage that risk. It's the same reason. Let's pick someone working as an industrial Abseiler on the side of the building washing windows. Okay, they are going to have a pre-safety check. Okay, what else should they have? Should they have one rope or two ropes? A primary rope and a safety rope? Okay. Should we have a standard of how their climbing harnesses are assessed and measured to make sure they meet certain requirements? What about the carabiners? What about the anchoring points on the roof? What about all the tools they're holding and the people walking below? What happens if you drop a 5-kilo bucket of water? If that bucket hits someone full of water, it's going to kill them. Okay, so we rope off areas. We put in these other compensating controls to manage the risk. The risk is a human could die. That's a bad thing. Just ask the lawyers and families. So what we do is we put up fences, we put up barricades, we put up signs, we have a security guard down there, and we keep an eye on the guys up there. And all the stuff they're doing is managed and risk mitigated. The same thing applies to cybersecurity. Your car has brakes. That's a safety feature. People don't think it is, but it is. You've got a seatbelt, you've got airbags, you've got crumple zones. All these things are safety features, and everything about that is to manage and reduce a risk. Cyber is exactly the same. If you can't have MFA on something, so what can we do to improve the security that to a level that is okay, we're okay with that you don't have MFA? Oh, we can't patch this server because it runs our critical business application. If we patch it with this patch, it kills the application, and that's where we generate our revenue. Okay, so What can we do to restrict access to the server instead? Can we migrate the server to something else? No. Okay. Can we put it on a segmented network? Can we restrict who can access it? Can we restrict when it can be accessed? What can access? Can we sanitize all the inputs going to it as a compensating mechanism because we can't fix this specific security fault? And that is what security is supposed to do. It's not, okay, sorry, you can't patch it, turn it off. Oh, look at that, business bankrupt. No, it is a risk adjusted approach to supporting and enabling the business. It's all about finding how about we try this instead to reach a comfortable middle ground, because you're here to enable the business. That is what security is here to do. IT is there to provide operational technology to run the business. If people want to complain about that, go back to using typewriters. See how long your mail now takes and what your mail costs are going to be instead of fractions of a cent per email versus, what is it, $1.70 a stamp right now?
I haven't sent a letter in ages. I don't know.
Exactly. But again, if you are that paranoid, there's nothing stopping you going back to lick a stamp. You can do that. Your speed of business will slow down massively.
Yep. I think I prefer the carrier pigeon or smoke signal unless it's a windy day.
Yeah, but a carrier pigeon's UDP, not TCP. There you go, tech joke.
Dad joke.
Yes. But yeah, it's all about managing risk, and it's all about that. And that, what policy does, it sets the baseline for where we sit, and then you can start having risk-based discussions because it lets you frame those conversations.
So effectively, we are putting in a policy that guides the business as to what we can or how we approach security, what we're doing to minimize the risk to the business. Everyone's on the same level because we know if I say, as you said, I've got multi-factor authentication, that applies to everyone.
Yes. No executive override or exemption.
Or the other. That's right. And however, as you said, we all know, I work in environments where there's factories that have still got a little computer that's running Windows XP with a specific program that's written that was done custom. So we can't go back to a vendor, and it's just been the way it's been forever. So we can't upgrade that to Windows 11. That's just not going to work. However, what have we done to protect that machine? Let's remove it from the main network. Let's let it do what it needs to do. And the compromise is if I need to upload a file which it knows to read and print something, for example, we manually do that the old way with a protected network drive and or the USB stick, plug it in and upload the file. That's the compromise that we've had to do to protect your computer.
An organization I did some consulting to where they look after medical clinics that receive patients with USB keys of radiology and MRI images. They have set up a secondary firewall, secondary internet, and Linux computers running off a live USB. So there's no hard disk in the computer. They then take those files and they take that USB key that comes in and they basically run an EDR across it. And then they also check it with VirusTotal and other online platforms and tools. Then they go, cool, this USB key is now safe to touch the network. Now, in most organizations, you go, turn off USB keys. But the nature of operations for this practice is that they need to be able to see that data of their patients. So the no but and no how about we do it this way is how you address it. If you go no, then they haven't got a business, which means they're then tolerating a much higher risk. If you go, no, you can't do that, they go, we have to run a business, bugger off. Now, you've provided them an alternative approach that takes let's call it 15 seconds to execute. You can have the key back. Because don't plug in USB keys you find on the road or anywhere. There's an organization in Brisbane that a friend of mine works for where they are continually finding USB keys dropped in front of their corporate headquarters. Wow. Now, they don't know, the staff don't know if that is actually hostile or if it is the security team running a test to see he needs to do more security awareness training. So no one is brave to touch them, which is exactly the outcome that the security team wants to happen. Because no one wants to lose half an hour on a Friday to sit through another training session on what not to do with a USB key you find on the road.
That's a great way to teach people. That's like one of the city councils here in Victoria. They sent out a phishing email at the end of the year with allegedly a Maya gift card saying, congratulations, you've earned this. I'm like, and most of the staff clicked on it. They weren't enjoying that Friday night training.
And that's one of the challenges. I'm on both sides of the fence on those types of phishing tests because you don't want to damage morale. No, if security is seen as the team that damages organizational morale, every other thing you try to do is going to be harder. But at the same time, the method they use is exactly what the bad guys will do. So I can see the pros and cons of it. There's no good answer, unfortunately. The bad guys are resourceful and they are vicious.
Oh, 100%. And I've faced this many times. So I try to take the approach with, and many other experts I know, we have the training and we let people know up front, hey guys, you're going to receive phishing emails. I'm not saying who it's coming from, or you might find something random lying around. So just a heads up. All I'm saying is be cautious, and that should usually be enough.
One of the touchstones I always circle back to when I'm training is if you receive something that's encouraging you to act right away, act with urgency, act with impatience, act without consideration, pause, breathe, reread, then act. Because all you need is that 3-second breath to turn off your amygdala, which is the fear-based response, and the impulse-based response, and go to a logic-based response. And fresh oxygen will help you do that. Just one big, deep breath. Okay, that doesn't seem right. They've never asked me to do that before. But again, this is why I say security awareness training and MFA, if you can do two things.
Yep, love that advice. And yes, every case is individual, as you said. If your boss is the person who never emails you and calls you to do something and suddenly you've got an email, then as you said, and it's urgent and whatever it is, exactly what you said. Stop, breathe, think, hold on. Bob doesn't send me emails. Maybe I'll just give him a call. Or the one that I still get, I guess on one hand, surprised, but on the other hand, I understand if you haven't done training, is when you get that email from a vendor that's come from the vendor's email that said, we've changed our banking account. Here's the details. By the way, here's the latest invoice. Do you mind just sorting this out as soon as possible? It's really urgent because we want to ship out, your next shipment, and they've already done the hack. They know what you're expecting, and that urgency is there. It looks legit. Call, because I've seen this happen, and I've seen companies lose.
And specifically, do not call the number on the invoice.
Yes. Because
if the bad guy's most likely broken into your vendor's email system. If they can do that, do you think they can change the phone number on the attachment they're sending you? So go to Google, go to White Pages. See, it shows my age. Go to your CRM system, your finance system, look up the contact details there, speak to them and ask them to read back to you an invoice number. Do not provide them the invoice number to verify, because if they've compromised the phone system as well, I need you to verify the invoice you're sending to this organization.
Yeah. All right. Last question, Luke.
Yeah, man.
If you had a magic wand and you could change one habit that every small business owner has, what would that be?
Understand that though they are a small business, they are still a passive target and they have risk from cybersecurity. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. Just because you haven't had a car accident doesn't mean you will never have a car accident. Acknowledgement that cyber risk is something that you need to address, and putting it off till tomorrow is not a suitable answer. The acceptance and acknowledgement that this is a problem in your business and you need to do something about it is probably the magic wand answer.
Love that. Luke, I want to thank you for your time that you've put away for the podcast, the energy you've given, and the amazing advice you've given. How do people get in contact with you?
From me, so I can be reached at info@aegiscyber.com.au, and that's AEGISCYBER. You can find me as Luke Irwin on LinkedIn. I am quite prolific on there. I'm always happy to have a chat. Even if it's not going to land in anything, I'm always happy to put aside 15, 20 minutes to explain what you could and should be doing and make introductions to service providers that I trust, that I've assessed and I've worked with in the past who I know can deliver. Because there's nothing worse than buying a service that you think is going to cover you, but doesn't.
Until then, thank you.
Thank you for having me.